Good morning to you, Mark Sett with HurricaneTrack.com here. Hurricane Outlook and discussion time as we take a look at Hurricane Maria. The 8 a.m. intermediate advisory winds are down to 75 miles per hour. It's really starting to spread out and lose its structural integrity, if you will, moving over cooler water. Thankful to Jose for that. But it's not going to last long. I think it still has a chance to try to regain some of its integrity, so to speak, as it moves north and away from the cold water wake that was left behind from Jose churning up the water in the region. And it still has to pass over portions of the Gulf Stream, which of course is a moving area of water. It's got some motion to it. But let's take a look at what's happening with it. Obviously, tropical storm warnings for the eastern part of North Carolina, the Outer Banks, including the Pamlico and the Albemarle Sound. And there will be impacts here. We're going to discuss that in just a moment. But the bottom line is this will turn and head out to sea without making landfall along the United States. But I think this is going to be a lesson, certainly in looking out several days and you see something that's turning out and you say, well, there's not going to be any impacts. There will be some impacts, and it's not just confined to where the tropical storm warnings are up. You're going to have high surf all along the East Coast here, and that's just going to continue to exacerbate some of the problems we've had with beach erosion. And, there are people that document this stuff, some fairly astute weather weenies all up and down the East Coast from Jersey to Fire Island, New York, and all points in between that take pictures, and they're really in tune with this kind of thing, and they know. And we're getting ready to leave hurricane season within the next several weeks. We still have a couple months to go, technically. And then we have to be, on the lookout for powerful fall and winter nor'easters. And when you have your beach compromised from a busy summer, even if you didn't have a direct hit, hurricane-wise, you leave yourself vulnerable. So it all matters. I think people think of impact, well, if it doesn't make landfall, that it doesn't count. And there are people who live along the coast that would argue strongly against that line of thinking. And so there you go. There's my soapbox piece for today. And if you look at Maria, it's still a very large hurricane, not as well organized. It's moving over cooler water, but it's not like it's being completely sheared apart. And, we've seen certainly much less organized systems in the past, and you can see fairly decent outflow still happening. It's just that the water temperatures in this area are a little bit cooler than we have seen in recent weeks due to the prior passage of what was once fairly powerful Hurricane Jose, which has now completely dissipated. All of the remnant circulation seems to be gone. I can't see it up there anywhere, at least on this particular satellite. But you notice too that even with the decay of the inner core here, there is this fairly strong band trying to set up. And as this moves, just right around due north, maybe a slight wobble to the west of north, bands like this, if they reach over and cross the Outer Banks, Rodanthe, Salvo, Waves, Hatteras, Avon, Buxton out there, maybe as far north as Kill Devil Hills and Kitty Hawk, Nag's Head, you could get some pretty strong tropical storm winds and some heavy rain, but it's not the wind and the rain that I'm necessarily concerned about, and neither is the Weather Service, and I'll show you that. First of all, there's the northern extent or the northwest portion of the rain shield, and we'll be able to monitor this and see how this evolves over time. If you've got radar scope, you can watch this, and I've also put the Weather Service radar here out of Morehead City, Newport, into our app. So if you have Hurricane Impact for the Android or the iOS, your iPhone, you can track this in the app in the tracking section. And there's the northwest portion of the rain shield. There's the Outer Banks. Again, the rain is not going to be the biggest issue. So let's take a look at what to expect. And this is the most important part of this discussion, is the impact here. We have tropical storm warnings for tropical storm conditions being forecast. And, of course, the storm surge watch in that sort of purplish looking color, and tropical storm watch to the northern side up here and the southern side down here, sort of bookends to this tropical storm warning area. So, what should you expect along the Outer Banks? Well, the wind, 45, 60 mile per hour wind at times. Overall, windy, breezy, blowing sand. If there's any rain, that'll be blowing. Visitors to the area can expect blustery, mild conditions. Again, the blowing sand can be a big problem. But the storm surge and the ocean that has already been put into motion by what was once a fairly powerful hurricane takes a lot longer to dwindle away than the wind, as we see with Maria starting to sort of unravel. And the potential impact here in the hurricane local statement is significant. And the main issue is going to be very high waves, 15 to 25 feet in some areas, with the possibility of major overwash, major beach erosion, the dunes getting chewed away, parts of Highway 12 possibly, and I would say likely, becoming impassable, especially down in the Pea Island area of the Outer Banks. And I'm going to click on here and just show you if I can get it right. I'm going to read you the forecast discussion out of the Morehead City office. It looks like I clicked into the water, and so it pulls that up. And we'll just click over here down in the Buxton area. And I want to read you the forecast discussion out of Newport Morehead City Weather Service office. And we scroll down, and this was issued 8:01 this morning. So it's very recent. And let's see if we can pump this up a little bit. Point size. So the primary concern, as they outline here, and this is written by real living people, not computer-generated forecast or whatever. Obviously, the big concern they say here is Hurricane Maria, and even though it'll be 100 to 150 miles offshore, the large tropical storm wind field, 230 miles from the center, will bring large seas and moderate to high impacts across eastern North Carolina, especially the Outer Banks. And they are fairly confident in this assessment because, again, since everything has already been put into motion in terms of the waves and the energy, that is going to be a big problem. And the slow-moving nature of the system will prolong and possibly enhance those impacts. And so they're talking about significant beach erosion is likely, with ocean overwash probable in the typical prone areas, and people who live out here, they know. And Highway 12 along the Outer Banks could be greatly impacted and may become impassable at times, especially along Pea Island. And I'll show you where that is. So this is the main thing right through here is the, impact to the highway, the dunes. And yes, it's a fragile situation out there on a good day, the way it's built. But people live out here, they work out here, there's tourism. This is, getting into the wedding season, fall weddings. People, not during the week probably, but leading into the weekend. So people are going to have concerns. Is this a giant issue? No, of course not. But for this area, it very well could be. And so people saying, oh, well, look at that, it's going to turn out to sea. Well, that is correct, but the impacts for this one small area, like we always say, you know what, it only takes one, and if it impacts your house, then it was a bad hurricane season. And the fact of the matter is Hurricane Maria has a chance here to create some big problems as outlined, especially in this paragraph right here for a small geographic area, but for the people that live and work and need to travel out there, it'll be a big problem. So, where are we talking about? Well, Maria, the center, will be way out here. There's no doubt about it. But the tropical storm force wind field will easily overspread portions of the Outer Banks, maybe even to that extent, maybe all the way down to Morehead City, perhaps. It just depends on how far west it eventually tracks. But focusing on the wind and the category or whatever in this case is not helpful. We need to look, again, at what I think will be the biggest issue, and that will be the energy that has already been generated and that will be driven ashore by these very strong and persistent, I say very strong, relative to a good beach day, northeast winds, and then as it goes by, well offshore, those winds will eventually switch to out of the north and eventually have just enough of a northwest component that the sound could be piled up in here and down to Ocracoke as well, and you could get some fairly substantial storm surge flooding along the sound side over here once Maria turns and those winds veer out of the northwest. So all that water is going to get pushed this way first, and then as it goes by, the water will turn and come around this way, probably on Thursday or so, late Wednesday into Thursday. And that is problematic. 2 to 4 feet of saltwater inundation, that's nothing to just write off. And when we talk about where Pea Island is, well, this is the Oregon Inlet up here, and they're doing some construction on the bridge, the new replacement to the Bonner Bridge. And then all throughout here is very, very vulnerable, this Pea Island National Seashore. And there's a little cut in here that Hurricane Irene made back in 2011, and I think that's it right there. Shows up even on this Google satellite shot. And so the wind here is literally going to just pile the water up in that long fetch. Huge waves are going to come in, and at those high tide cycles, this is going to become impassable, and it's going to be a big problem. And then again, maybe the storm surge coming around from the backside, maybe impacting areas from Rodanthe down to Avon, over here, Hatteras Village down here in Ocracoke Island, where I understand that evacuations are going to take place to keep people safe, especially visitors. So that's the big picture for a small area up here that could be impacted. But even if it's just a tiny area that's impacted, it's still an impact. And that was the point all along in talking about what we were seeing earlier in the week, and then that was going to head out to sea, maybe not that close to Bermuda, and there was really no talk of impact except for the swells. And I just thought, again, reminding people, look, it's not over till it's over. If it gets close enough, maybe a landfall, but certainly the potential for some impacts here. And I just think a lot gets lost when people focus on category, how strong are the winds. We saw the absolutely mind-numbing impacts down in the Caribbean from both Irma and Maria here, and maybe we compare too much to that. Well, if it's not going to be like that, then it's not going to be a big deal. And that's just not the right way to think about these things. And if we look back at Harvey, the Harvey that made landfall near Rockport, Texas, was not the same effects that inundated the Houston and the Beaumont, Port Arthur, Nederland area, I think that's how you say it, of Texas, with, in some cases, more than 5 feet of rain. And what category was that? It was, quote, just a tropical storm at that point. Well, Maria is just a tropical storm. Well, it's still a hurricane, but it'll be tropical storm conditions. That's what I'm trying to say, along the Outer Banks, and that's going to have an impact. So I'm not trying to blow this up into more than it is. Some of you are going to cough under your breath and say, yes, you are. Look, the impact is the impact. And for people that don't get it and don't understand how this works for different areas, no matter where it is, you're missing the bigger point. If you're just looking for the really high impact events that, going to show up basically like your ESPN Sports Center type highlight reel of major damage and houses flying through the air, then no, this event is not for you. But in studying the impact and what's going to happen to the coast, the interaction between the high tides, those big waves, the overwash, all of that matters out there on the Outer Banks. I've become very good friends with people out there. The whole intricate network of how everything works out there, a lot of people just don't get it. But there's a lot of people that visit down there from Ohio, from the D.C. Alexandria area, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that being said, I'll be heading out there this evening. I'll be staying in Rodanthe for tonight, Kitty Hawk tomorrow night and beyond, and I will set up camera systems and a weather station, the weather station in Rodanthe, to try to capture possibly sustained tropical storm force winds. We'll be able to monitor it. In fact, if you have our app, now's the time. Well, this evening and tomorrow, everything will start being activated. The camera systems, the wind, the pressure, all that. And I'm going to show you. I'm going to give you ground truth as to exactly what happens. And in fact, I'm going to put some cameras in some very interesting places this time. We're testing a couple of new things, and I'm going to take this as an opportunity to advance some stuff that we're working on for the future, as well as to show what impacts there are, and maybe make a believer out of a few people who are thinking that this is really perhaps overblown. And maybe it is, okay? I'll end with this thought, and I've said this before. Just because something should happen doesn't mean that it has to happen. All right? And the analogy, I love my sports analogies. Just because the 92% free throw shooter should make both of his baskets or her baskets and win the game, maybe the national title, who knows, right? It could be a YMCA pickup game for all it matters. Doesn't mean that they have to make those baskets. They could miss both. They could miss one, who knows, right? The forecast is for significant impacts to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and I'm going to go up there and we're going to see if it verifies. It's as simple as that. This is my job. This is what I do. What else am I going to do? Sit here in Wilmington and just watch it? No way. That's not why I got into this. I got into this more than just the big impact events like Irma and Katrina in 05 and Charlie in 04, etc. And those who know my work know that I'm dedicated, and the stuff that we do now certainly helps for the future, no matter what the impact is. All right? I'll have another video blog later today, and probably this evening, actually. And we'll see what happens. I'll be out on the Outer Banks by tonight, and I'll be able to show you firsthand what's going on. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, I appreciate it. I am Mark Suttoth, HurricaneTrack.com, and I'll talk to you again next from the Outer Banks of North Carolina.